valley pan time. Let's go ahead and cut this piece. Since this is, say, we'll just go a foot long from our point, and we're gonna have 6 inches of coverage, so we'll just go 40 inches. All right, so this detail is a detail that seems like a lot of people are interested in, and it's what happens up here at the valley. We're gonna have this ridge cap coming into the main roof, and I'll take you through our process. Sure, there's a million different ways you can do this, but this is what works for me. So I've got my piece here. This is the last piece. I've got my overlap, and I've got my center line designated so that I can make sure that it's gonna stay straight with the rest of the valley. I've already marked where my center line is on my ridge, and this is gonna get notched and bent over. All right, so this is where my center line of my ridge is gonna meet the center line of my valleys. So now I'm gonna go ahead and notch this out so that I can start working on bending this over. All I'm really doing is getting this out enough so I can just cut it off. Now for me, I always have to think about this as kind of like origami, because I want this pan to lay down into that valley, and then I want to make sure that I'm tucking and folding and applying adhesive to this location kind of every time I layer it, so that when everything gets done, water's gonna run downhill and over a mechanical flash backed up by a bead of silicone. So you don't wanna rely on the silicone or sealant. You wanna rely on mechanical flashing, but you wanna always have a backup. I got this bend here to go over the ridge, but now the goal is to take another piece and have it go up, fit over top of this guy here. This will fold down. The goal is for always to flash over top, think like water. One thing I found is that it's always just a lot of cut and fit. All right, so this is just temporary right now. We're gonna make sure that we like everything, and we're gonna line up this other W valley. I got a line snapped through so I can make sure that it stays perfect, and then I'll make some marks and attempt to make this thing look beautiful, you know, for the birds. Okay, so as I slide this other piece up here, I'm looking to line up the ridge of my W with my chalk line and my valley line down there. I'm rubbing a little bit in here. Yeah, that's where I want to be. So I got to adjust this, redo a couple bends. That should be much better. Let's go ahead and put these screws back in, holding it in place so it's not getting in our way. I should be able to use this. 46, I mean, that's pretty darn close. I did want it at 46, actually 46.49. Now, just for the double check, I should be able to run this right into this angle. I look to be right on this line, right on this line. So that means that this is the right angle. And I always do this first because I don't want to cut and mark and bend until I can confirm it's right. So you can see this is going to be right off the top of the ridge, and I'm going to bend it right here. So it's going to lap over, giving me a little bit of mechanical flashing. And then this is all going to die into this guy, and I'll have to do a couple bends and folds as well there. But one thing at a time. I just wanted to check, make sure that's good. Okay, this is where it starts to get a little tricky. Kind of keep laying this out here. Make sure we're still where we want it to be. Take my pencil and I'm gonna follow where this is going to meet this guy. Now, I always go a little bit high because I can always cut a little bit off. The closer you get, the better you can see where those lines meet. This is a painstaking process, for me anyway. I think I about got it now. I think I got everything about where I want it. Now, the thing to realize too is that this is actually gonna all be covered up with this ridge cap. But the thought is here, you know, you do your best so that if wind-driven rain gets in here, it can't really be detrimental. But also, you know, if rain were to come in or water would get in at the top side of where the ridge cap is gonna die, that it's gonna hit and go downhill. So as long as the wind and the weather isn't getting inside of here, because you've got a cap with a weather resistant foam closure strip that's gonna be installed in here, it's not gonna be blowing. It might be some moisture that gets in, but gravity is gonna do its job as long as you don't allow a place for water to wick in. Time to pull plastic, finish the bends, make them tight, and that's about it. You know our mentality, right?
Do our best.
Yep, caulk the rest. Switch it up. Or take it to your right. More. Okay. All right, so if you guys are still with me, that is the detail for the W Valley up here where the ridge dies in. And it's a complicated detail, at least for me. I wish this was a little bit tighter, but it is filled with some sealant. And before we put our hip cap over top of all this, I'll run another little bead of sealant right here along these edges just for a little bit of extra protection. But I'm pretty confident that this is a nice leak-free detail, especially once all the finishing trims are over top of it. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna keep going on this, get the rest of this valley done so we can run these panels up and over this valley. I have no doubt you could probably see how much detail work goes into a valley, a hip. A lot of times people want to know, you know, how much does a standing seam roof cost versus a regular roof? It's not that bad if you're just running straight panels, gable to gable, but as soon as you enter in to hips and valleys, transitions, terminations, penetrations, anything that involves trim detail work, that is where the time is spent, and that's where it gets pretty expensive. So if you've got a ranch style house with maybe one valley in it, like this, probably not that big of a deal. You start getting into cut up roofs, that gets expensive real quick. But the good news is we hit our mark. Center of our rib is right at the center of this valley line here. And we're now finally up and over and gonna be headed down the roof. Yeah, it's a little bit different cut, but hopefully it was about a 0.2 degree difference. What I did was I took my Stabila and I ran it on this angle here, and that could just be a little bit off placement of this W valley, but it's basically almost the exact same thing within 0.2 degrees, like I said. So I think that's good. And this steel is super hot. Holy cow. So now let's see how this goes in here. Duh. There we go. All right, so this piece fit in here really nicely. So I went ahead and made up 4 panels. I figured if we can run 4 panels and not have any incremental difference that's noticeable, then I can run the rest of the panels all on the ground, just using the math that I used to develop those 4 panels. But if there's any discrepancy that starts to develop, then I know something is off just a little bit in my measurements, and I can adjust it instead of making all of them at one time, which would have been nice to do, but I just like to double check. Okay. Okay, go ahead and go up. I'm right on my mark. This is what's gratifying, dude. I just want to lay them all, you know, but I'm scared, and I like to double check my work before I just go hard on it, you know. Mother fricker, dude. No, finish me, dude.
Yeah, you gotta rephrase that.
Finish my plastics, brother. So you can see, since we've done all that pre-work, it's really not that bad to run the panels in the valley. It's just all the detail work and the prep work. The actual panels go fairly quick. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it's fairly quick. Well, another hot one, guys, but what's amazing is that we were able to get through this valley. Looks like my camera stopped as we were installing these last couple down the way, but now we're on easy street for the rest of this roof here. And then we just have to do, we just got to come out of the valley on both of these little roofs, but I think it's no big deal. We've done like all the hard work. The trims are all down. We know all of our dimensions. We just have to make them up. Takes about 5 minutes a panel by hand. You guys maybe have been seeing us using the Swenson snap table. We would love to be using that for all the hand cutting and notching as well, but unfortunately there was a miscommunication. The notchers were made wrong. It wasn't their fault. They had the panel they thought was the right panel, and you know what, it just is what it is. So they're making us new notchers. However, I don't know when we're gonna get them back, so we've just been using the old Midwest snips, which is a lot of work. It's a lot of time, and it's probably not as good of a job either, but we're getting it done and it looks beautiful. I mean, look at those lines. The valleys are crisp. They're watertight. Pretty excited to get the rest of this roof on because I think it's gonna look pretty amazing from the air. But that's gonna be another day. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you guys on the next video. Have a good one.